And if the people don't harmonize, if they're not aligned with the business, if they don't openly communicate, if there is maybe a lack of trust or a suppression of innovative ideas, the company cannot thrive as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Being Framework Community Podcast. Today, I have Jacqueline Hofste, one of the great people in our community. I know her for so long, but I'm going to give her an opportunity to introduce herself to you. Jacqueline.
Thanks, Ashkan. It's really great to be here and to be the first one to kick off this podcast series. A little bit about myself. I'm a leadership coach. I work with businesses in team development and implementing a healthy, effective team culture, as well as individual clients. And that's not how I started. I started in science. I studied physics back in Germany. That's where I'm from. And then I decided, once I finished my master's, I decided I want to explore the business world. And I was really drawn to teamwork. I was always drawn to teamwork. And I almost completed 2 decades in the business world. I worked for small companies, bigger companies, global companies. And one of my responsibilities was implementing cultures. And now I'm following my deeper purpose in getting the best out of people and working with them either one-to-one or in group settings. And I started my third career as a leadership coach. And we go back a long time. And we've also worked in the business world. So I'm very excited to be here today and talk to you
Awesome.
about team collaboration.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, Jacqueline, like for our audience out there, so that they know where you're coming from, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the time that you've been in the corporate world, in SciTech, Schneider Electrics? Tell them a little bit about that, the experience that you have.
So when I migrated to Australia from Germany, that's really where my business career started. And I worked for the almost 2 decades in software development. And software development does need a really good team culture. All the different groups and teams from the different departments have to work together. And this is really where I felt home. And I could see how people often find it challenging to resolve conflict. Or sometimes we would identify someone who was a poor, the performance fell down. And what I saw and what I noticed, it's mostly not the technical skills, even though they're very important. Mostly it was due to behavior. And I really started to see under the bonnet and learned to understand how people operate, how teams operate, and what really makes a successful, effective, and high performing team.
Yeah, interesting. So, so we're doing this book called Being Matters, and in one of the volumes, you're doing this article. Obviously, I've read the article, but now for our audience, um, so let me ask you this question. The title is Why Collaborative Teams Are at the Core of a Great Company. Yeah. So tell us why team is so important.
Um, yeah, so at the core of any service that's been delivered or any product that's being created by a business are people who create this. And if the people don't harmonize, if they're not aligned with the business, if they don't openly communicate, if there is maybe a lack of trust or a suppression of innovative ideas, the company cannot thrive as well. I mean, we do have this triple constraint: quality, time, and resources or finance. And also, research and science tells us, who are looking into what makes us a successful company, what makes successful teams, they say this is a really great measurement, but what's missing is people, because people are running it. So you can
Mm.
have the best processes in your company. If the people are not aligned with it, if they're not understanding why they're using these processes, then it will undermine the effectiveness.
Mm. I see. So through you've gone through the trainings and with being profile and being framework. And for a while now, you've been using the tools, the principles, the framework, the methodology. And so you're coming from this I mean, the very extensive background, like in the corporate world, like working in Stahl Electrics, Cytec, working with small to medium-sized businesses as well, like later as basically like the time that I've met you. So now tell us, like in this thing that the team, you know that the team is quite important, the team culture is quite important, like how the being framework is coming to support uh, so that you can leverage and then create that kind of a culture that you know to be working like in organizations. How do you leverage that?
That's a very good question. And let me take it back, like when I was actually working in
Oh,
the corporate, I didn't have those tools. So I
mm,
was using a fairly intuitive approach. I didn't have all the detail and the clarity how to move a team from conflict to trusting
mm,
themselves. So I had quite an approach where I was open and authentic with the teams, and I had a sincere interest in collaborating with teams, because that makes my day also better. Now, with your work and your amazing framework, which details the deeper human qualities and what's really underpinning, if we don't have open communication, if a team gets stuck into conflict and can't move out of it, it gives a common language and it gives a framework where you can look step by step what is undermining this behavior, because behavior is a symptom, but your framework goes below behavior, so to speak, if I wanted to use that metaphor, and really explains what is happening, what makes a leader effective, what makes a person effective.
mm,
And it looks at these deeper human qualities, which maybe back in those days I intuitively understood, but I didn't have the framework and the clarity to
yeah.
use it as a tool.
So many of the people that are watching this may not know much about the being framework, but so um, let me ask you this question. Like, and you have it in your chapter. There are symptoms of dysfunctional teams. Yeah. So now I would like you to tell us how, so what these symptoms are, or how they can manifest this dysfunctionality, how it can manifest itself throughout an organization. At the same time, then how you leverage the framework to identify these the root
Mm.
causes behind all of these dysfunctionalities that people deal with, particularly in organizations on the surface.
Yeah, so when we talk about dysfunctional behavior. Um, I like to sort of look at different levels of dysfunction. And as I mentioned, our deeper human qualities are underpinning behavior, and they may not be so visible to us. So when using your framework, um, giving some examples of deeper human qualities, it's authenticity, vulnerability, communication, self-expression, accountability. So that sort of these deeper human qualities. Now, they're not so visible at the surface. So you can experience a team that has dysfunction, but it may not be so visible. And they may even be quite successful. And the business is going quite well. This is also where I use the distinction between good and great. So maybe a good company and clients are coming in, revenues generated. There are no major visible conflicts. And sometimes it can be hidden a little bit under sort of a cover of being nice and we're working together, but we're not really collaborating and we're leaving the other person, to their own devices. And it seems good and it is relatively good. But if you want to create a great company, in my terminology, the way I look at it is you need to work at the culture. You want to have open communication. And you also want to have a healthy level of challenge, so you can elicit innovative ideas. So that's kind of the first level. It is not so obvious. So you need to develop as a leader. If you come into an organization, you need to develop that lens. Are
Yeah,
people
so
really?
basically you're saying that, like, we often talk about this invisible. Yeah, so when you mention behavior, obviously the behavior is on the surface and people can actually see that. If they're sharp enough, if they've developed this vision, they can see the behavior, and that perhaps would be the easiest part. But often these behaviors are not just on the surface. There is the underlying causes, or there are reasons that these behaviors are showing up. Yeah, so there are certain more underlying factors that they drive these behaviors. So now this would lead you to the second level, I think. Yeah, you said there's three levels, and the first one is the behaviors. Like, what is the second?
The second level, sort of the way I observe it, when it becomes more visible, when the business is a little bit suffering, when projects falling too much behind, there are always challenges. And not every project is delivered on time, but you need to understand how much is too much.
Mm-hmm.
And the business is a little bit suffering. It can also be when a business is in transition from a startup to a slightly bigger business, and the current team culture isn't keeping up with the new way of business. Maybe they need to be more aligned with processes. They are bigger teams, and communication is much more of the essence. So then you start seeing a few of the KPIs falling behind. That would be sort of what I say my second level, where things become a little bit more visible. And the third level would be when you come into a business where you just virtually feel how suppressed people are, how unhappy they are, and how the leader is not embracing open communication, and they may want to be the one who is running everything, but they're not open and letting their team grow into the space. They truly lack awareness, often lack awareness around how much it's costing their business if they do not have the right culture in place. That awareness can completely be lacking,
Yeah.
and that's the third level. Well, we also want to
Yeah,
look.
interesting. So, yep. So, we often experience that, like when organizations come to like consultants, to the people that they may be able to support them, it's often too late. It's often too late. It's like there's certain precautions, there's certain preparations haven't been addressed, and they come when all of these symptoms are so apparent. And often, what we see is they come with a particular problem at hand. They go, oh, like we have this particular problem. This thing in our sales team is not working. Um, and that often the problem is not what they picked, you know and that's just a part of it. When we go there and then we dig deeper, and then we see there's so much more that it's not in place. So how do you think, like going from a being perspective, being the scores perspective, like particularly looking into the qualities that we direct attention of people to look at, these 31 different qualities that like we know that are quite important, and then we go, okay, so let's look into responsibility, how responsible the team is, how committed the team is, how courageous the team is, or assertive. So how um, the ontological model of the framework, the list of these qualities, simply put, it supports you when you go in an organization, and then you want to try to understand what's going on, identifying some of those underlying matters that they drive those behaviors, and they make them apparent and visible. Yeah.
Mm.
What's your experience with that? Like how does that work?
Yeah, I like how you started with there's something not going well with the sales team. That's a symptom, and that happens a lot. And when people say, "Well, it's the marketing team, it's the sales team, it's the testers," and something is not going right there, and it may be in their perception that it is their team, it is the other team. But to look deeper under the bonnet, obviously, you with your being framework also sort of have a few tools at hand, and the core tool and probably the starting point is the actual being profile assessment itself, where individuals can take their assessment. They go through 240 questions, and they get a status back on 31 aspects of being, that how you call them, authenticity, vulnerability, responsibility, communication, and it comes back with a health factor, as in, does the individual have a healthy relationship to responsibility, or is it pivoting to an unhealthy? I mean, that would give an indication. It's like, going to the doctor and saying, well, I'm not really feeling so energetic. You have no idea what it is. That's the symptom. That's the sales team not
Yeah.
cooperating. And then the doctor does this, maybe a blood test, and then gets the health markers, and a couple of health markers may be out of balance. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really sort of how we look at the being profile. And that is a starting point to see, all right, so maybe there is a trend also in a team that in general, a relationship to vulnerability, which is one core um, um, effectiveness indicators for effective leadership, is, do
Mm,
you have a healthy relationship to vulnerability? It's a big one. And if people
mm,
are holding things to themselves, or they're not trusting the other, and the communication is not flowing so well, one of the aspects of being could be an unhealthy relationship to vulnerability. And then the next question is, why is that?
mm.
So
Yeah.
that would be my approach.
Yeah. So let me add to this. So, often we deal with unknowns. So, as you said, like some of these things are quite like as symptoms. We should see them as symptoms. They're telling us something is not working. They're telling us that the integrity of the team, of the organization, um, um, we're out of integrity, meaning that some of the constituent parts are not working now, whether it's going to be in our processes, whether it's going to be in how people are being, and then that's leading to their behavior. So how our culture is, so all of these things we can look into, but in the beginning it's unknown, and then it is an unexplored territory. Now, so starting with that, um, often we experience that when we work with the leaders, we want to draw their attentions to the blind spots. So they're going to be confronted, because like they think that, oh, it's just this process that is not working, or um, they think some of the surface level matters often, but then when you want to draw their attention to, no, there's more in-depth conversations we need to have here, and then they need to jump into this unknown. In the beginning is like there's tremendous amount of uncertainties associated with that. So that on itself, as you said, like, it requires vulnerability. It requires courage to actually not avert their gaze away from these deeper root causes, and actually face them uh, uh, with authenticity, like see them as they are. And that's perhaps one of the things that with the being profile, when we work with the people in the team, then we want to see these sides of themselves that they are not necessarily willing to look into. Now, as you were talking, you said the right team culture. What do you mean by right team culture?
That's a good question too, because the team culture needs to be tailored to a business, and you can have a team culture that is supporting the values that you want to represent. Maybe you have a business that is has more conservative clients. They need a high level of quality. They are risk adverse, or more risk adverse, and you want to have a culture or a team culture that is also representing this. And maybe there's another business where you have to take a lot of risks. You need to be highly innovative, and you need to try out things. You need to challenge each other to be able to try out things. That's a very different culture. So a team culture needs to be tailored to the business, and it also needs to be adapted, because as the business moves through its own development, it might grow, it might stagnate for a while, maybe it can go a little bit backwards before it goes forward again. Each of these sort of turning points in a business requires to also revisit the team culture, revisit the values. Are they still the values we have? Do we need to make some adaptations? What's our vision, mission? Has that changed a bit? And then adapt the team culture according to that. So that's what I mean by right team culture. There is not just one fits all.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not like you have a kind of a blueprint and then you think that it'll work for every organization. But basically,
No.
you're saying that every organization depends on like their intentions, the goals that they're setting, their mission and vision and values. They should perhaps put a very intentional effort in creating a culture, not that let the culture just develop by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this also starts with the hiring process. So once you're clear
Mhm.
on that, you can hire people with that exhibit certain behaviors
Mhm.
accordingly. And
Yeah.
you don't want to have a whole company just full of risk takers. That is
Yeah.
out of balance as well. So you also need to look at the overall profile,
Mhm.
and maybe you need a couple of risk takers, but the others are maybe more conservative thinkers, more
Yeah.
strategic,
Yeah.
or looking at safety. So yes, you need to look at that as well.
Yeah, so very basically from the get go, how. But see, like when we're talking about that, it's actually quite important to notice that, do we really have that kind of a vision as decision makers, as leaders in organizations, to discern and tell the difference between this person and that person when we are hiring them. So, because like when it comes to the hard skills, as they say it, and so let's say, for example, if you're getting salespeople on board or engineers on board, then that's a fairly easier, I would say,
Mm,
to just see if they are competent and proficient
mm,
in their field. But then, and there's this other part which has to do with their attitude. It has to do with the, like often um, it is said like soft skills, but both you and we know that it's way beyond the skills. Yeah. So when we talk about communication, when we talk about authenticity, that person uh, intentionally want to put what they have in the team. So it's way beyond the skills now. So there, what are some of the traditional ways that you would have gone, like as the senior executive in some of these large corporations you work with in the past? So how you would manage to tell the difference between a person who is more authentic and assertive and proactive and
mm,
compassionate and more effective in generating trust and create alignments and go with the team and bring positive outcome uh, in comparison with a person who's not. So, what
mm.
was some of these traditional ways that you would go about like choosing this person over that person from the get go when you were starting teams?
That is a good one. And at times, going back to my corporate career, we developed teams from scratch. We even tripled teams.
Yeah.
And I got to get a lot of experience in hiring. And I worked, as I said, in software development. So it's mostly an engineering based skill set we're after.
Mm.
And you could say, oh, we need we need the top people, we need the most qualified people, and obviously technical skills are very important. But what we came to learn is that what is more important, or what is often making the final decision, are the behavioral skills. So in our interviewing process, we had that covered by checking the technical skills first, and then going through what's commonly understood as a behavioral interview. And we made sure we wanted to have team players in the team, people who are not just focusing on this is my thing, I'm just going to do it my way, which can be absolutely detrimental. We wanted to have people who are open. Back in the days, we would have a script that is checking on certain behaviors, and it's checking how people in the past would have reacted in certain
Oh.
situations. So, the general idea is if someone is, let's say, risk adverse, um, or worries a lot, the sort of general conception is they probably are going to do this now as well. It's not 100%, but it's an indicator. So this is one of the tools we would have used back then. I wished I would have had the Being profile at that time, but I didn't. And then also as leaders, we do have what's called intuition, and
Mm.
I also I'm quite connected to my intuition. And sometimes
Mm.
I ask leaders, I said, do you use your intuition in your decision
Mm.
making process? And some say, intuition, what the hell, what is that? And then I
Yeah.
say, do you use your gut feel? And they say, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is, we are wired as human beings to sense if someone is hiding something from us, or they're pretending
Yeah.
something that's not correct.
The site that is like more measurable and you would look into data over their previous experiences, you would say, with like you develop that kind of vision and discernment to tell the difference, and you develop that over time by interacting with more and more people, and then you go from there. Now, so um So, but there is one very important thing, and you touched on it a few times here and there in this conversation. Now, when you were um, adding people to your team, and then you go through your processes, like your hiring processes and everything, and then you're asking them questions, you go through those scripts and everything. At the end of the day, like we human beings, we can easily lie. We can
Mm,
be inauthentic. We can project a kind of a persona, which is way different to the self image that we have, to the person we know ourselves to be. So we're not necessarily feeling obligated or compelled to project a persona that's not exaggerated. You know.
mm,
So, and then that often happens in the hiring processes,
mm.
and that's one of the things that it makes it harder. You know, when you said that we're reading the scripts, and what if the person is in pretense? Yeah. Now, at the same time, see, I'm not suggesting that we need to always like look into everyone with that kind of a cynical lens, but so let's take the conversation to the next part because if you're choosing the right people to be added to your team, where are these great people? Like, where were these great people that are of integrity? You know, do we have them? What's your experience like? Did we have like perfect people to be added to the team?
Look, we're all human beings. I'm a human being. You're a human being. No one is perfect. So I do operate from the premise we are not perfect, but we can work on ourselves and we can polish ourselves. So also coming back to the hiring process, it is not so much about finding the perfect person who does the tick in every box. It is more a sense of a matter of finding someone who is open to change, who is open to adapt, and who sees, for example, a teamwork as priority versus their own personal career. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a career and shouldn't look for it, but you can be quite competitive. So these are sort of the things to look for. There is no perfect employee. There is no
Yeah, yeah, of
perfect leader.
course.
Um, and sometimes we look for, oh my God, I need the best, the top people to generate a high performing team. That is maybe required in some instances or for some specific role. In general, it is not what's required.
Yeah,
So yeah. So you would
yeah,
be looking for openness and for a level of awareness and the
yeah,
willingness to cooperate in a team and, what I was going to say, surrender to a higher purpose.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's definitely that's very important. Now, of course, like we don't have perfect people. None of us are perfect. But as you mentioned, yeah, this vulnerability, like living life from this viewpoint that I'm vulnerable. I'm vulnerable to um, very different things, from diseases all the way to natural disasters. Like our angry neighbor, our cheating partner, our unfair boss, or jealous colleague. So we have all of we're vulnerable to all of these things now. But whether we live life from that viewpoint or not, that's a different thing. Now,
Mm,
so and also, as you mentioned, our empirical data through the being profile, like thousands of records of data that we have, like indicates that the vulnerability, like openness, as some people would like to put it, it's extremely important. Does that person have a healthy relationship with their ego, with their self, knowing that, yeah, I'm going through this pathway, this is my career, and I know that I'm not perfect. I want to keep working on my skills in my domain, uh, whether they're engineers or salespeople. At the same time, I'm willing to be working on myself, like going through transformation, going through changes. But that all starts with like identifying what's not working. What are some of these
Mm,
underlying qualities that I'm not relating in a kind of effective manner, or as you
mm,
said and we said here,
mm,
in a healthy manner, and having healthy relationship with vulnerability is like, am I being guarded all the time? If there's any little feedback or critic is going to come to me, I'm going to be offended. I'm going to take my guards up. I'm going to immediately um, point to some external factor and then blame others. Or no, I'm going to be open, I'm going to receive it, I'm going to see if any part of that is going to support um, me and the betterment of the the team that I have, I'm part of. So that's actually quite important, as you said. Okay, so let me go to the next part. Another question I wanted to ask you is, so in your chapter, you talk about the differences between a group of individuals versus a team. Yeah. So what is the difference? Like, isn't just a team a group of individuals working together?
yeah, that is a very relevant distinction. It also comes back to sort of where I spoke about the three levels of dysfunction, and it often comes back to the first level of dysfunction, where it's seemingly at the surface people get along, they do their tasks, they're friendly and nice, but are they really a team? Or are they just individuals working in a team? So that when we do develop a team culture or a collaborative team, the individual team members look at the higher purpose of the team, the bigger goals that the team needs to achieve, and they create a sound relationship with partnership, where it is not just about me completing my tasks, it's also about collaborating and sharing information with others. When I worked for this large global corporation, Schneider Electric, which I think is a fantastic corporation for also learning about leadership, and I learned that they were very transparent. So if a team has decided to change or course direct a project or start a new project, they would always think, who else in the company, it's a big company, who else could be impacted? Let them be informed of what we're doing. And that wouldn't necessarily happen when people happily work in silos. So it's a whole different level of how to cooperate and work in a team. And there is no place in a collaborative team. There is no place for, over exaggerated egos and competition. There is the bigger purpose that's driving the team. And also a healthy level of conflict. I mean, we often talk about conflict, we need to move people from conflict to trust, but there's a healthy level of conflict, which I also experience with engineers who
Yeah.
could challenge each other in a healthy level to elicit new ideas. And that's team
Yeah.
collaboration at a much deeper level. So they could come to a much better solution versus, oh, I'm working on my thing, I'm fine, don't tell me what to do. And sometimes also a level of accountability. So when we, maybe ourselves, we're not so
Yeah.
accountable. We sort of are out of integrity a little bit, and we also don't hold others to account. I find that's a big one because people shy away. They think, "Oh my God, I can't hold this person to account. How will they react? Will they reject me? I'm the bad person." But if you hold someone to account, focusing on the task, not the person, as in,
Yeah.
it's fine. It's just
Yeah.
pointing someone into a direction where they can be more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so
So
see, like
yeah.
I think, and this is for our audience as well. we have this common experience among the people in our community that you know, they're tapping into the being framework. And also, I mean, most of you guys like Jacqueline and you have extensive experience working in different realms. Like you're coming from a corporate world mainly, but so when we talk about these collaborative teams, when we talk about effective performance, high performance, so sometimes this picture that we were creating and talking about integrity, it may land or it may seem quite utopian to so many businesses or business leaders out there, especially SMEs, the small to medium-sized businesses or startups, that they may not have experienced a high degree of effectiveness. Hence, with due respect, hence, like they're where they're at, and they can't grow the business beyond what it is. So, but then, so like when I was studying these highest achievers, like these leaders, particularly, I can be good number of them, I mean entrepreneurs, like people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And now, regardless of like if some people are happy with their intentions or not, like we haven't looked into them with a team from a benevolence perspective, or like if they're altruistic people or not. Yeah, no matter what kind of intentions they had, but we can clearly see the track record of them being quite effective when they set a goal, when they have an intention they care a lot about. Uh, e- Evidently, you can see that they could bring the different resources together from capital all the way to people's work, not the people themselves, but they could manage to do that. So we can see that. And then, like when we look into their some of their interviews, like so you talked about like healthy conflicts, Jacqueline. I remember this video I was watching when I was studying these great leaders from Steve Jobs, where he was talking about like he was a kid, and then like it was like there was this particular person in their neighborhood, this old man, and once this old man took some ugly, I mean the typical rocks, and then put it in a device, and then asked him to go back tomorrow. And then he goes there and he sees that all of these rocks are quite polished and beautiful. And then he was using this metaphor, was using this analogy to say that in a healthy team, you don't want to avoid conflict. Actually, the team member being like, I would add to that, being assertive, they would say their whatever is going on in their mind, and then they choose not to be offended, and they have these clashes like these rocks, and then that's going to develop that more polished teams, or going from that group of individuals to a team. Now, similarly, like when we talk about, for example, authenticity, recently I was watching this interview with Jeff Bezos, where in which he was actually talking about the culture of truth telling in the team culture. He was talking about this thing that by nature we're not telling beings as human beings. We are social creatures, and we want to fit in, and we want to not create much conflict, etc., etc. And then he was saying how important he knows authenticity, and I add that word, but saying truth telling is in the team. And the list goes on. You touched on intuition, like we've seen in our studies, that many leaders talk about intuition, while some others may laugh at it. There was this interview with the current CEO of Apple, Tim Cook,
Yeah.
and then he was actually saying that like lots of people think that I've made because I'm coming from an engineering background, I've made most of my decisions in my career out of logic and rationality and metrics. And but then he was saying that no, actually I've tapped into my intuition a lot. And
Mm.
so, long story short, what the reason I've brought all this conversation up is like all of these things that you're saying, or we're saying in collectively, in great part, in from a community perspective, may seem quite utopian to so many businesses out there. But evidently, there are companies there that they know how to hire the right people.
Mm,
They know how to support the people to grow within their organizations, and that's reflecting itself on the growth of these organizations, generation of revenues and profit for the shareholders. We can see that. So, what do you have to add to that, Jacqueline, for people that they may be so resigned or
mm,
skeptical,
mm.
around,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, to start with, you packed a lot in there, but
yeah,
bringing it back, yeah, to your question. I mean, I also fully appreciate it. I appreciate we do not live in a perfect world, and you know the way the world and the way business appears to me or a person can be quite overwhelming, and that's a very valid experience. And people think, oh my god, they become cynical and they think, oh yeah, that's not going to happen, you know. And I do understand this, because there are many levers, so to speak, that make an effective team and an effective business, from all the processes, the technical skills, to the behaviors, to the culture. There is a lot in it. So the way I see it, I want to show it to people it is possible. And I've been in a situation where I took on a large global program, and the teams in Australia and in Europe had a major conflict, and they couldn't untangle it. There is a lot to it. Um, but even though there is a lot to it, it is possible because we see it. And I was able to untangle that. And it is like one step at a time, and learning to trust yourself, and also understanding, how do I start? For example, in this situation that I was at that time, if obviously I had to go to Europe and associate and collaborate with a team in Europe. This was a high performing team, as well as the team in Australia here. But together they came into a lockstep. So I didn't go over there with a grandiose plan. Oh, look at this, we're doing this now. No, I went there being humble and listened for days at end. I listened to their concerns. I was open. I was authentically interested in making it work. And
mm,
after a few days, they could see that. So basically, I broke the ice, so to speak. Step
yeah,
number one. And they started to warm up. And obviously there is also a lot more to in regards to communication, and having consistency. There's a lot to it, to actually maintain this. I'm not saying it's not a lot, and depending on the complexity of the company, but it starts with very, very simple steps. And this is often not appreciated or not understood. It's a very simple step, maybe not so easy, but a simple step to actually listen to the other person. Listen and listen until they have conveyed their concerns. And working on yourself, becoming this authentic leader. It is not something that happens overnight. It takes a long time, or it can take a long time. And what I also want to highlight is there's a difference between an effective team and a perfect team. Well, there's no perfect team, but often
yeah,
we sometimes may collapse these meanings, as in
yeah,
the effective high performing team is perfect. No, they're not perfect. They're not.
mm.
But the way they deal with
That's a good point.
matters, the way they deal with it, yeah, exactly. And you put on so many matters that we are confronted with. The way they deal with it could be in an open, collaborative, empowered way. And often we also see empowerment. Oh, everything is easy, I'm flowing. No, it's not. We have to deal with a lot of things. The
Yeah,
question is
when I say that's a great point because yeah, so often when we talk about like being of integrity or for example being effective individual, effective leader, effective team, it lands as if like we're talking about 100% or
yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
Yeah, but we're not. We're not talking about perfection. It doesn't mean that like if we increase the effectiveness, overall effectiveness in like the endeavors we engaged ourselves in, it means that we're perfect or 100% of the time we're going to fulfill the intentions that we have. But it's not a zero and one conversation. Yeah, it's not a black and white like in this spectrum of like you being able to fulfill most of the intentions you put or increasing the probability of hitting the target with ease and flow. Not necessarily, we're not saying that it's, well, it's simple but it's not easy sometimes.
yeah.
And what's the alternative? Yeah, but okay, so now, yeah, so that was one of the key things I wanted to really bring it up, like around, um, because if someone is going to think that this is too utopian and not feasible, it's like a fairy tale. They're not going to even take those
Mm.
first simple steps that you were touching on, Jacqueline, and they're not going to pursue what we know that it's possible.
You talk about it a lot also with
Sure.
the people who are sort of more cynical, which I appreciate. I do not
Yeah.
make them wrong because I can clearly see it. And you have a chapter in your book called Time Matters. So not everyone is going to jump on board with the new company, the merger, the new project at the same time. And some people need a little bit more time to also validate for themselves. Are they just listening to another pipe dream of a leader who is not connected? Or are they listening to an authentic leader who knows what they're talking about? And that is also something that makes people who can be quite cynical eventually come around and they think, okay, I think I can trust this leader. This is a bit of a different leader. I remember when Schneider Electric had their latest CEO, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, who almost ran the company for 20 years and just became a board member or chairman recently. When he took on, you could just see, oh my God, this is an authentic leader. And
Mm,
what he did for this company was amazing. So I'm still listening
yeah.
to him. And, eventually, also people who are quite cynical, they think, yeah, I think that there's a difference. And that's when you can see when someone has polished themselves and it starts with a leader, when they've done this work, when they are authentic in a world that is, has a lot of lack of integrity and not being authentic and corruption, and who stands there and holds the space. No, I'm
Yeah.
authentic here.
Yeah.
I'm the real deal. People notice
Yeah.
it, and you can be a trailblazer for this. So what we do, not
Sure.
everyone does, but
Yeah.
yeah. So
No,
time
thank
matters.
you. No, no, thank you, thank you. And yeah, so I know that like on the same line of conversation, you do have in the chapter you're doing, so it's not published, but will soon be published in the next couple of months. We're aiming to publish the 3 volumes of the Being Meta series book throughout this 2024, this year. Now, so in your chapter, you talk about some of these case studies like Spotify and Toyota and BMW. And so, well, we don't have the time to go through that today, but like I know that you've worked on these case studies so that you can depict a kind of a picture in the real world that it is
Mm,
possible. It is possible.
mm,
Now, apart from that, so we're going to for you, the audience that are joining us. So we're going to put Jacqueline's and Genesis link to the in the description so that you can access some of the great work that she has done so far. There's some good articles. I have them in front of me. Is your team stuck in victimhood mentality? Yeah, that's a great one. I've read that. Your team is a reflection of who you are. That's another one. Another article is what are the distractions costing you, and then you have good number of you've got good number of articles there. The power of intuitive leadership, where to go from a guilt like great luck position. I haven't read that one. From conflict to trust. Okay, what space travel teaches us about team performance. We forgot actually to tell people that you have some background in physics, like your background was science, and we didn't talk about that much. But there's of course there's a lot about you, Jacqueline. You're a great member of our community, and I'm pretty sure that like those people that they work with you, they've benefited so much so far. You also have quite a decent amount of knowledge when it comes to Jungian archetypes. You've done a book on it. We didn't get to talk about so much about you, Jacqueline. And for those of you, the audience that are joining us, we're going to do more of these conversations with the key people in our community, and I hope that you learn about them, access the resources that they have provided, the knowledge they have, and some of the great work that they do with people. So we'll put Jacqueline's link up there, and I'm pretty sure they can reach you, Jacqueline, if it's like they find it necessary for themselves on the platform. And is there any final thing you want to say before we wrap it up, Jacqueline?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for putting me in such a good light.
I mean,
I really
I was
appreciate this.
saying what it was. Yeah.
And I do appreciate the opportunity to be connected to a business, or people, not a business as such, like in Genesis, and really do what you know align myself with this business, because this is my higher purpose. This is my sweet
Mm.
spot. This is what I'm passionate about, and so I'm so looking forward to the collaboration and more collaboration. We've been collaborating for quite some time, and yeah, and I thank you to the listeners. I hope you've learned a bit from this conversation, and feel free to connect and reach out. I love to have a conversation with you. So thank you, Ashkan.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you, everyone.